ENA3 Overview, Giovanni Partita, ENA3, Joliet Central High School. As we were supposed to come up with an idea to create a lamp to hold our bulb, I began searching the internet as well as MakerWorld to find some inspiration. Finding this inspiration with the images shown as well as others. Carrying this over and creating a sketch using ruler, dial calibers to create a close replica of what would be my final product. With this project comes the testing of our measurements. Taking them and constructing what would be my final product with scrap cardboard and plastic, coming from home as well as class. Cutting them out using box cutters and hot glue. Afterwards, creating a more realistic prototype using laser cut cardboard and hot glue for my materials. I utilize laser cutting in both my prototypes as well as my final product. First changing the laser cut settings to cut cardboard out from my prototype builds, and finally using the previous measurements to cut out the cardboard to construct my final product. I began by transferring over the measurements I had into Inventor, starting off with the part for the case where my bulb would be held, and later transferring them over into 2D to be cut. Afterwards, I began working on the back base, which was used to hold the product against the wall, having to go back sometimes to edit for the socket, as well as spacing for the cord. For 3D printing, I only had to print the back base, first having to save it as a PDF file and insert it into Bamboo, then adding tree supports, adjusting for color and material, and using the chip and USB to transfer over my project into the 3D printer and begin my print. Later, going back after the print to clear off the rest of the tree supports. This, while it was probably the longest project I did, it was definitely one of the most fun. Getting to utilize both the 3D printer and the laser cutter to create this final project. I have to say I am happy with this final result. After such a long project, I began to practice for something new, that being this year's 48th annual IDA Regional Draft and Design Competition at JJC, which I competed in alongside several classmates. It was a good time getting to compete with friends as well as other people from different schools, getting snacks and lunch, while also getting to walk around the JJC campus. After a good trip, I began researching for a new project I wanted to create, searching once again the internet and MakerWorld, finding on there 2 projects of a case and earbuds, deciding to combine these to create my earbuds casing project. Taking this idea and creating multiple sketches, coming out with the image shown, with the measurements as well as designs that will be changed and tweaked later. Afterwards, taking the measurements from these sketches and moving them over to create my models within Inventor. Making some mandatory changes involving scale, as well as changes in the overall design. While the first sketch measurements were very close, I did have to go back time after time to the 3D printer to create test prints using these measurements. And after a few prototypes, I came out with my final result, having the perfect measurements, connecting each one of my parts together. One of the last steps of this project being me taking my final measurements / model and moving them into Bamboo, adding tree supports and changing materials. Later taking the USB as well as the chip from the 3D printer and using that to transfer my project into the 3D printer. This project, while challenging in its own ways, taking multiple prototypes to finish the final measurements, was fun. I am happy with this overall final product. While I was finishing the past earbuds project, I began researching for cool laser cut projects past students had done for their final project, coming across a graduation themed laser cut plaque. Taking that idea and creating a nameplate as well as graduation 2025 laser cut design. I then took that idea to AutoCAD, creating sections for what would be the names and images of other students. Having to write down what each person wanted and gather those images across the internet. Afterwards, outlining each of the images using the spline line tool as well as the hatch tool, finishing my design. I then opened my saved file on the front computer, having a little help from both Mr. West and my classmate Brandon due to my hatch and outline having trouble on the laser cutter. Then once finished with the settings, cutting out my parts and hatching a line on the back of each nameplate for a space for the 2025 design. Afterwards, I took my parts from the laser cutter and got materials from Mr. West's cabinet such as glue and Q-tips, taking the 2025 parts and aligning/gluing them across the engraved line on the back of the nameplates. Once I was finished with gluing each of the 2025 nameplates, I began handing out each to each person throughout different periods, telling them to take a picture with it. This project, I would have to say, is one of those most meaningful projects, with us as seniors most likely not seeing one another later on, and me wanting to create something that they could take along with them, remembering both this class and their experience with their peers. Overall, I am happy with this final project. Throughout my entire journey within ENA 3, I have had assistance along the way, which I must give thanks. I would like to thank Mr. West for answering questions I had and providing materials I used throughout the semester. I would like to thank my classmates such as Brandon and Juan for assisting me with questions I had, as well as helping me set up the 3D printer and laser cutter. And lastly, I would like to thank you for watching. Goodbye.